Before looking at the average egogram of juvenile reformatory youth, I first need to talk about the impression I received in the field. When I first visited the juvenile reformatory, what stood out to me was an unexpected ordinariness. The youths studying with GED textbooks open did not look very different from students in a private academy classroom. The staff in the field said something similar. The kids are really well behaved in here. This is not a sentence we should pass over lightly. Inside that sentence, an important question is hidden. Why do youths who look well behaved inside the walls sometimes move in completely different ways once they go outside? To answer that question, we first need to shift our gaze. If we begin by asking, are these kids originally bad? The path has already become narrow. The more important question is this. Why do the same youths look different here and then become different again outside? Before this question, structural reading must come before moral evaluation. The average egogram of juvenile reformatory youths should be read from exactly that point. If we follow the graph from the left, many people receive an impression different from what they expected. The line is not extremely rough or collapsed. Rather, there are several sections that overlap closely with the overall average. First, CP is 31.9 points. It is almost identical to the overall average of 32.0 points. This means the structure is not one where standards and normative sense have completely collapsed. NP is 34.3 points. It is slightly higher than the overall average of 33.9 points. This is not a group where relational sense and caring energy have completely disappeared. A is 31.1 points. It is slightly higher than the overall average of 30.3 points. The power to read and calculate situations is not very low either. Up to this point, the average of juvenile reformatory youths is far from the graph of completely broken kids that people often imagine. Standards remain. Warmth remains. Judgment functions remain. If we look only at the front half of the graph, these youths are more ordinary than expected. This ordinariness is important. If we define a person's essence first with the phrase juvenile reformatory, we miss the first scene this graph shows. This average does not show these youths as a strange species. It first shows that they are youths within the same human structure as us. The core appears on the right side of the graph. FC is 32.6 points. It is higher than the overall average of 30.9 points. This means the desire to act, vitality, and the force to move immediately stand a little more forward. AC is 31.0 points. It is lower than the overall average of 32.2 points. The power to stop, endure, read the atmosphere, and apply a brake to oneself is relatively weak. And the final axis, SC, is 34.3 points. It is 4.8 points higher than the overall average of 29.5 points. This point rises most clearly in the graph. When we look at these three axes together, the impression of this average becomes clear. The output of desire is strong. The force to push forward again is even stronger. And the brake that suppresses them is slightly lower. In everyday language, it is this. The accelerator stands a little ahead of the brake. This does not mean these youths move toward delinquency because they lacked energy. It is the opposite. They have the power to move. They have things they want to do. They have the power to change their current state. Even when blocked, they have strong output that reaches out again. The problem is not the size of the energy. It is the direction of the energy. So the core sentence when reading this graph is this. Delinquency may not be an absence of energy, but output that has lost direction. To understand this average more clearly, we need to read the three right side axes as one set. In other words, we need to look at the arrangement of FC, AC, and SC together. In the general average, the middle axis, AC, usually provides a certain degree of balance. Even when there is a desire to act, it suppresses it a little. It also regulates the force to push forward again to some degree. So the overall flow is gentle. But the three right side axes in the juvenile reformatory average show a different picture. FC rises, AC falls, SC rises sharply again. In other words, this is not a shape where the middle supports the structure thickly. It is a shape where output on both ends is alive. In one sentence, it is closer to a valley than a mountain. Rather than a structure where middle adaptation firmly holds things down, the energies at both ends, desire and retrying, come more to the front. This arrangement is important for understanding the texture of behavior. The force that wants to act rises strongly. The force that wants to change the current state is also strong. Compared with that, the power to stop and endure works slightly late. So, the delinquency of these youths is more likely to come from strong output that found the wrong exit than from numbness or coldness. Then why do these youths look calmer and more well-behaved inside the walls? It is difficult to read this as a change in nature. It is more accurate to see it as a change in weather. A juvenile reformatory is a space where strong control, rules, surveillance, evaluation, and hierarchy are clear. Inside this kind of weather, anyone puts a different mind forward in order to survive. They read the room, they adjust, they reduce problems, they move toward following rules. In other words, the good behavior inside the walls may not be the result of a newly formed personality. It may be the result of an adaptive face standing forward under strong weather. On the other hand, once they go outside the walls, the air changes, control weakens, immediate stimuli increase, peer relationships and street pressure also come alive again. Then the other axes that were suppressed inside may rise to the front. FC, that pushes what one wants, may rise. SC, that tries to change the current situation somehow, may gain strength. At times, CP that collides with the outside may also lift its head again. So the difference between inside and outside is not betrayal. The same youth uses different ego state arrangements depending on the weather. It is more accurate to read the difference between inside and outside the walls not as a double nature, but as a difference in ego state switching. The axis we must examine most carefully in this average is, after all, SC. It is not enough to read this simply as strong stubbornness or high rebelliousness. Here, SC should be read as retry energy that does not turn off easily. It is the force that refuses to leave the current state as it is. It is the force that tries to break through again, even when blocked. It is the inner endurance that says, I will not end like this. So this axis is both very dangerous and very important. If this energy connects to dangerous belonging, impulsive behavior, immediate reward, or distorted competition for recognition, it becomes the engine of delinquency. But if the same energy connects to technical training, sports, study, vocational training, creation, self-proof, or responsible roles, it creates a completely different result. Even the same SC changes the shape of life completely depending on where it connects. So the most dangerous axis in these youths is also their greatest asset. At this point, the direction of education and rehabilitation also needs to change. Turning off strong output in these youths is not the answer. Simply applying a stronger brake may not be enough either. If we do that, problem behavior may decrease temporarily, but the strongest drive inside the youth may also be turned off with it. What matters is not breaking SC. What matters is reconnecting it. This retry energy must enter the circuit of achievement rather than destruction. When that happens, the engine of delinquency can become the engine of recovery. The core message of this average graph is clear. Juvenile reformatory youths are not youths without energy. Rather, they are youths with a lot of energy. Their normative sense has not completely disappeared. Their relational sense remains. Their thinking power has not collapsed. What we see is that the output of desire and retrying stands more forward, while the brake that suppresses that output is slightly weak. So the direction of adjustment is also clear. What these youths need is not for their energy to be treated like sin. It is not to make them feel ashamed of desire. It is not to cut off strong drive. What matters more is changing the socket through which that energy flows. That socket may be sports, it may be technical skill acquisition, it may be study, it may be a role that carries responsibility within a team, it may also be vocational training and achievement experience. The core is to make the strong FC and SC inside these youths connect toward achievement rather than destruction. There is a sentence we must hold on to here. Energy has no sin. Having a large desire does not make it a sin. Having a strong power to try again does not make it a sin either. The problem is what climate, what relationship, and what exit that energy met as it came outward. The average egogram of juvenile reformatory youths is not data for blame. This graph tells us to see output before deficiency. It also tells us to see connection before suppression. When this perspective appears, delinquency moves a little away from the language of stigma. From that moment, the egogram becomes not a scorecard for judgment, but a starting point for adjustment. To summarize, the core is this. Delinquency may not be an absence of energy, but output that has lost direction. Energy has no sin. The problem is not the size of the output, but what direction and what connection that output met.